Good evening. This is Dr. John Bennett broadcasting from Miami Beach for Neurosurgical TV. Today we have the pleasure of having Florencia Gallo. She's a biomedical engineer from Argentina that specializes in neurotechnology, and she's going to be talking to us tonight about brain-computer interface. And we also have a guest from Argentina. Joaquin, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do, etc., before we turn it over to Florencia?
Okay. Hi, I'm a fifth-year neurosurgery resident here from Argentina, from Buenos Aires. I am at the hospital of San Isidro, and we see adult patients and also pediatric patients.
Very good. Welcome, Joaquin, a surprise edition. Okay,
Thanks,
Florencia, it's all yours.
Okay. First of all, thank you, John, for inviting me. And thank you, Joaquin, for being here and all the people who listen. I'm Florencia Gallo from Argentina. I am a biomedical engineer and I specialize in neurotechnology. I am doing my master's in neuroscience, and I'm currently part of a startup which develops augmentative and alternative communication systems. I am working in the development of a brain-computer interface, or BCI for short, to integrate into our current systems, and I have been working on BCI development for rehabilitation for 4 years, more or less. I really love neurotech, and I'm convinced that this is a key discipline to improve people's quality of life and providing new medical, technological, and educational applications. So I will be sharing my screen.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about brain-computer interfaces, their fundamentals and applications. So I'm going to talk about what is a BCI, how do they work, and then we will do an overview about the different types of BCI, their applications, limitations, and the future of the field. I will be sharing this slide after the webinar, so you can go over it and look for any additional information if you are interested. Also, please feel free to ask any questions at any time. I don't mind to answer questions during the presentation.
Okay.
So let's start by saying, what is a brain-computer interface, or BCI for short? The first of at least more common question that I hear when I tell people that I work with brain-computer interfaces is, oh wow, can it read my mind? Because, you know, it sounds very futuristic, and I know that when people hear BCI, they think in something like this super complicated machine. And I always say, no, it can't, but yes, it can. Because BCI measures the brain activity and translates it into a command that can be used for a lot of applications. For instance, to compensate lost or damaged brain functions, like restoring motor functions, paralyzed patients, to provide supplementary or augmented functions, or to entrain improvement in existing functions, like in neurofeedback. So it kind of reads the mind, the brain to be precise, but obviously it's not going to know if you are thinking in a sandwich or which candidate are you going to vote. It's not that sophisticated. So then, how do they work? BCI work in 3 main steps. They collect the brain signals, then do some signal processing, and give commands to a device according to the input received. So this device usually provides feedback to the user. So we say it is a closed loop, where the user learns how to command the interface, and the interface learns how the user's brains work. So they learn from each other. So these steps vary according to the BCI technology and the application, but they all work in these 3 main steps. So let's go through them one by one. So I know that you are in the medical field, so I suppose that you already know some fundamentals about how the brain works and its anatomy. So if there is some lingo you don't know, please tell me or let me know so I can explain it in more detail. But, well, BCI measures basically the brain activity in terms of the neuroelectrical activity or the blood flow changes. We know that when neurons communicate between each other via synapses, this produces electrical currents, and also the blood supply increases because the neuron metabolism rises as well. So in terms of neuroelectric activity, because this is a method I work with, so I'm more familiar with the neuroelectric activity, the currents generated by the neurons oscillated, and these oscillations can be separated into spike trains, local field potentials, and large-scale oscillations, according to the spatial scale that we are using to measure it. So the spike trains can be seen when a single neuron fires action potentials. So we have to measure a single neuron to detect a spike train. The local field potentials can be seen when a small cluster of neurons work together. And oscillations are considered to result from changes in their synchronization. So local field potentials comes from a small cluster of neurons. And then we have large scales of oscillations that can be recorded when a group of clusters work together and the activity of distant neural structures synchronizes. So we can measure different clusters working or communicating between each other. So since we know that the brain has or is somatotopic, we can link these neural oscillations and synchronizations to different cognitive and behavioral functions. For instance, we know that Brodmann areas 1, 2, and 3 are the primary somatosensory cortex. The area 4 is the primary motor cortex, and area 17 is the primary visual cortex. So we know if we record oscillations changes in one of these areas, that these changes are consequence of a specific information processing by the brain. Okay, so once the BCI has measured the brain activity, the next step is to process the signal in order to get a command for the executed device. I will talk about electric signal processing because it's related to my work, but there are also signal processing methods for hemodynamic activity. So the data is acquired by multi-channel sensors that register the neuroelectric activity in the areas of interest. The brain signal is a very complicated signal to process because it varies a lot between and within subjects and is very, very small in terms of voltage. So when it's recorded, the signal is mixed with a lot of noise. That's why the next step after the data acquisition is to pre-process the signal to clean the data from the noise and artifacts. The next step is to extract useful information from the signal, and once this signal information is extracted, it has to be classified in order to provide an output. Are we good right now or no? Okay, so let's go deep into every step of signal preprocessing. I won't go deep into the math regarding signal processing because we will be here until Monday. But if anyone is interested, we can discuss it after the webinar. I don't have any problem. In general, several spatial and frequency filters are applied to the data. Other methods are used to remove artifacts as the eyeball movement, the eye blinking, or the muscle activity in order to obtain a clean signal. It is very difficult to design a single bandpass filter that can selectively eliminate the noises affecting the signal. So usually it's used several filters in combination to do this. We also use differential amplifiers to reduce the effect of common noise that can be present on the electrodes. This is hardware. We implemented it on the hardware. And there is also a direct current component that needs to be rejected. And of course, the power line noise, that is 60 or 50 hertz. We also apply a filter to reject this noise that is present all over the signal. And there are also spatial filters to figure out which area of the brain the signal is coming from, like the Laplacian filter. Okay, so once we have a clean data, the next step is to extract useful information from the signal. This can be done in the frequency domain or in time domain, according to the feature of interest and the BCI application. So, for instance, the most common feature used for neuroelectric BCI are the event-related potentials that include sensory evoked potential, and these sensory evoked potentials can be visual, auditory, somatosensory, motor, or even event-related. So these event-related potentials are very short specific responses to a specific stimuli. So they cannot be seen in the original signal because they are very short and very small in terms of voltages. So that's why we can use specific techniques to detect them. These techniques can be, for instance, peak picking or averaging, or I don't know, there are a lot of methods. But the important thing is that there are a lot of frequency, temporal, and spatial methods to perform feature extraction according to the feature of interest. So we have to choose before, when we are designing the brain-computer interface, we have to choose which method applies to our application. We have to do it first. Are we clear right now? So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then, once the signal information is extracted, it has to be classified in order to provide an output. The BCI decides which kind of mental task the subject is performing and decides what to do with this information. For that, there is another set of methods that can be used that can recognize which type of information the feature is. And this is called a class. In the example, in the slide, imagine that the BCI is controlling a mouse with imaginary hand movement. So the two classes are left or hand imaginary movement. So the classification algorithm has to decide in which hand the subject is thinking and provide a feedback according to that. Well, to decide this, it is used statistics, pattern recognitions, and machine learning methods. In general, machine learning methods are used when the two classes, or when we can have more than two classes, but in this case, these two classes are not linearly separable. That is, we cannot draw a line like the one who is drawn in the slide to separate information into two classes. So we need to train a machine learning algorithm to do this separation, because it's not that simple as to draw a line. So once the signal is classified, the interface sends a command to the feedback device. For instance, it can be a computer when the signal will be used to move a mouse, or it could be a robotic arm where the data is used to allow movement. Okay, so that is basically how BCI work, regardless its technology and application. So before moving into the different type of BCI, I don't know if there is anything I can clarify from this section. John, it's okay? Okay, great.
Yes.
So let's move into the type of BCI. In general, we can classify the BCI as non-invasive and invasive. The invasive types are implanted directly into the brain during a neurosurgery, while, okay, someone has joined the meeting, I think.
Yes, someone just joined us.
Hello. Okay, so the invasive types are implanted directly into the brain during a neurosurgery, while non-invasive collect signals from outside of the body. The non-invasive types can be in direct contact with the scalp, such as electroencephalography, EEG for short, and the functional near-infrared spectroscopy, FMRI for short also. Or they can be non-contact or remote, such as PET, there is positron emission tomography, MEG, magnetoencephalography, or FMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. Those are two long words for me, sorry. These non-contact technologies are mostly used with research purpose, since they are very expensive and limited. Currently, the most used technology for BCI implementation is EEG, due to its low cost and portability. I will go deep in that later. So in the invasive types, we have intracranial BCI, which senses brain activity from the brain surface, such as ECOG, electrocorticography, I think it's pronounced. And there is also intracortical BCI, which measures the local activity in the different cortical layers, such as microwires or multiple electrode array. So in this slide, I have also separated the types according to the type of brain activity they measure. Okay, so FMRI, PET, and FMRI measure the blood flow changes in the brain due to an increase in the neuron's metabolism, while microwire, MEA, ECOG, EEG, and MEG measure the neuroelectric activity produced by the electrical currents oscillations. Okay, so according to the type of technology, the electrodes placement will vary as well. So for instance, for EEG and FMRI, they are placed in contact with the scalp, while ECOG electrodes are placed in the brain surface. Microwires penetrate the cerebral cortex to reach the target cluster of neurons. As we can see, every type of electrode also impact in the quality of the signal and in the voltage that is being measured. So not only the electrode placement will vary, but also the spatial and the temporal resolution will vary. The temporal resolution can go from milliseconds from the electrode arrays to minutes using PET. And regarding the spatial resolution, the implantable arrays allow to discriminate between a single neuron, also very reduced cluster of neurons. But for instance, EEG measures large neurons populations in several centimeters. So we have to choose wisely what kind of technology are we going to use when we are designing a brain-computer interface, because the temporal resolution and the spatial resolution will be compromised by the type of technology used. Okay, so let's go deep into each technology. For invasive intracortical BCI, there are single unit BCIs, which detect the signal from a single area of the brain cells, and multi-unit BCIs, which detects from multiple areas. Electrodes have different lengths, up to 1.5 millimeters for microwires, as you can see in the slide, or 10 millimeters for a multiple electrodes array. The quality of the signal is the highest in this technology, but the procedure has several issues, as for instance, the risk of forming scar tissue. The body reacts to the foreign objects and builds the scar around the electrodes, and this causes deterioration in the signal. Also, because neurosurgery is a risky and expensive process, it is used only when surgery is necessary for medical reasons. For instance, in the case of an epilepsy evaluation. Okay, I know Joaquin you must work with this if you are neurosurgeon.
Yes, yes. This weekend I already have like 2 cases about epilepsy or implanting profound electrodes.
Okay, and do you use microwares or you use ECG? What type
Both.
of technology? Okay.
Both.
So the same happens with ECO. It uses electrodes placed on the exposed surface of the brain to measure electrical activity from the cerebral cortex. So it also requires a craniotomy to implant the electrodes. The electrodes may be placed outside the dura mater, epidural, or under the dura mater, subdural. The strip or grid electrodes covers a large area of the cortex. So it can be used from 4 to 200 electrodes. And this allows a diverse range of cognitive studies that we use later to implement a BCI. The advantages of this type of BCI are its high spatial resolution and the signal fidelity, because we don't have the skull between the electrodes and the brain. So we can measure the signal from its source. And they also have a lower clinical risk over a long recording period, since it doesn't damage the brain tissue itself, because they are just placed on the surface. They don't penetrate the cerebral cortex. But of course, there is high risk of infection and rejection because they are placed in the brain. So we have like an open skull there. So invasive BCI are used mostly for research purposes and require a surgical procedure. This reduces a lot the volunteers willing to test them, because no one wants to get brain surgery for that. But there are some cases of paralyzed people that offer themselves to test this type of BCI because of its accuracy and its promising results. We will see them in a slide in a moment. So let's move into non-invasive types. Here we have the EEG type, which is the most used method and gold standard for BCI applications. Since it's non-invasive, it has excellent temporal resolution. It's quite cheap to implement due to the recent hardware development, and offers portability and versatility. It mainly consists in an electrode array placed in the skull and the recording of the changes in the neural oscillations beneath the electrode. So we can register different brain rhythms and evoke potential over the head, and they can be used as, they can be associated with a specific state or task and used as a command for the interface. The disadvantages of this technology are the spatial resolution, because the electrical signal which travels through the skull is attenuated due to the low conductivity of the bones. So we have a very tiny signal and a lot of noise and a poor localization of the cluster of neurons which are causing it. But it is still the most used because it's not invasive and allows us to move the BCI from the lab to the street, let's say. So as I mentioned, in recent years, several commercial headbands for BCI applications have been released to the market. These development kits are low cost, high quality, biosensitive hardware for brain-computer interfaces. They allow any student, research maker, or hobbyist to develop their own BCI. In the case of OpenBCI, that is here in the slide, the entire kit is open source, so you can actually download the schematics and make your own EEG board and build your own headset. I know it for sure because I work with this hardware. So you can use it to sample EEG, muscle activity, heart rate, body movement, and much more. It has an accelerometer, and you can do a lot of recording and adapt the headset to whatever application you want. And also the quality of the signal are research grade. So it's very cool to work with this type of hardware. So the other type of non-invasive BCI are used more in research due to their cost and their limitations. The FMRI technology is being more popular due to the advances of the detectors, because FMRI uses a near-infrared emitter that sends near-infrared light to the brain through the skull, and a detector array which measures the light attenuation. So the fact is that the skin, tissue, and bone are mostly transparent to near light, while hemoglobin is a stronger absorber of light. So it can measure relative changes in hemoglobin concentration. These changes are linked to related changes in localized cerebral blood flow, which are linked to neuronal activity. So when an area of the brain is in use, blood flow to the region also will increase. This neurovascular coupling is known as the principle of hemodynamic response, or the blood oxygen level dependent response. This principle also forms the core of FMRI techniques. In fact, FMRI and FMRI are sensitive to similar physiologic changes and are often a comparative method. FMRI has several advantages in cost and portability over FMRI, but cannot be used to measure cortical activity more than about 4 centimeters deep due to limitations in the light emitter power. And it has also more limited spatial resolution than EEG, because it measures the blood flow and not the neuroelectric activity. So then we have FMRI, which is the favorite brain mapping research method, because it does not require surgery, substance, nor to be exposed to radiation. But of course, you need an MRI machine that is quite expensive. So the resulting brain activations can be graphically represented by color coding the strength of activation across the brain of the specific region studied. So the technique can localize activity to within millimeters. So it has a very, very nice spatial resolution. But using a standard technique, the temporal resolution is not better than a few seconds. So we don't have a very nice temporal resolution. This is the gold standard for research studies. And at last but not least, we have the EMEG that measures the magnetic field caused by the electrical currents in the brain, and it offers a better spatial resolution compared to EEG. Why is that? Because magnetic fields are less attenuated by the skull and the tissues than electric fields, and they are not affected by electrical artifacts, such as muscle activity, eye blinking, line noise. So it is better than EEG, but again, you need an EMEG machine, which is very expensive, and it's practically non-portable. Although wearable and pretty scary scanners like this are being developed, so EMEG will be portable in a few years from now. So to conclude this section, I found this very nice chart which sums up the different technologies I mentioned, their physical principles, the advantages and disadvantages. I put it here so you can go over later and review it. I will not read it because it has no sense, but it's a nice summary of what I was saying about the different technologies. So another type of BCI classification depends on the nature of the stimulus that it's being used to command the interface. We basically have the spontaneous response, in which the user can produce the required signal whenever he wants, and the evoked response, in which the interface provides a stimulus and then senses the user respond to it. This kind of activity is phase-locked activity because they always occur after a defined time. For instance, the P300 evoked potential occurs 300 milliseconds after a new visual stimulus is presented to the user. So spontaneous activity is non-phase locked. For instance, if I ask a subject to imagine a hand movement, and then I register the activity change in the motor area, I don't know when the user is going to imagine the movement. I will see it in a signal recording, but I'm not sure when it's going to occur in my recording. So basically, we have evoked and spontaneous response to work with BCI implementations. So these are the main BCI types and their working principles. Of course, this is just an overview. There are more methods and even combination of the ones I mentioned. So if anyone is interested in discussing one particular method further, we could discuss it, no problem. Okay, so far so good? Are
Yes.
we good? Okay. So let's continue with the BCI applications. So BCIs can replace functions that were lost due to an injury or a disease. For instance, the communication, when a person had a stroke or has lost the ability of speak. They also can restore lost functions. For instance, stimulate the muscles in a paralyzed person. They also can be used to improve functions, for instance, in a stroke rehabilitation. They can enhance functions, for instance, when you want to train your level of attention during demanding tasks, that is neurofeedback. BCI can also use as a research tool, as I said, to study brain functions. That is when FMRI machines are used as a research tool. So the main application, or at least the one which I like more, is to replace or restore the physiological functions of impaired patients. So we have the mother of BCI, that is the cochlear implant. The original cochlear implant was invented in the 1957, and the modern multi-channel cochlear implant was first implanted in a person in the 70s. So this is a neuroprosthetic device that provides a sense of sound to a person with severe to profound hearing loss. So they require surgery to be implanted. So they are invasive BCIs. They bypass the normal acoustic hearing process and replace it with electrical hearing. Basically, the sound is converted to electrical signal, which directly stimulates the auditory nerve. So the brain adapts to the new mode of hearing and eventually can interpret the electric signals as sound and speech. So here we have a lot of plasticity working. The same principle for hearing is being developed for vision as well, in which the optic nerve or the retina could be replaced for electrodes to send the signal directly into the visual cortex. This is only experimental. There isn't a commercial device for this yet, but it's definitely being researched because it has a very promising field for those who cannot see. So there is also motor restoration, in which BCI commands a robotic limb, so it can replace the missing one. The most advanced BCI also provides sensory information, so the intention of movement is sent Then it's the code to command the robotic limb, and the robotic limb has sensor which collect the tactile stimuli and sends it into the sensory cortex so they can be interpreted by the brain. So we have a really closed loop brain-computer interface here, because it not only commands the device, but also collects information for the environment and let the brain to translate it into a sensation. This field of research has led to awesome neuroprosthetic as this one. In this case, the robotic arm is commanded by a peripheral nerves that remain intact from the amputation. So usually, previously surgery is needed to allocate those nerves under the skin so the sensor can detect them, but they are commanded by the brain. So there are a lot of these type of neuroprosthetics. Although they are not connected to the brain, they are commanded directly by it using the healthy peripheral nerves. But what happens when we have an intact limb, but the peripheral nerves are not connected to the central nervous system due to a spinal injury or a degenerative disease? In this case, the robotic limb is not attached to the body, and it's commanded directly by the brain. So in other cases, the brain signal can be used to stimulate the paralyzed limb, commanding the muscles without the peripheral nerves. Okay. So here we have two applications that both of them are invasive BCIs. They are using microwaves or multiple electrode array electrodes. One is used by command an external robotic arm, and the other is used to restore the function of the muscle, because the spinal cord has been compromised by an injury or by a disease. Another type of motor restoration are the BCI-controlled exoskeletons for stroke rehabilitation, which helps the patient to recover from movement in a faster way by allowing feedback between his brain and his affected limb. So the brain plasticity is enhanced. In cases where the rehabilitation is not possible, they also can be used to command wheelchairs, for instance, providing more autonomy to the user. Another type of BCI for motor restoration is this commercial medical device known as deep brain stimulation, which is a neurostimulator or a brain pacemaker that is implanted as a heart pacemaker, which sends electrical impulse through the implanted electrode to specific targets in the brain for treatment of movement and neuropsychiatry disorders. This is mainly used for Parkinson's disease, for essential tremor, dystonia, but it also can be used for treatment of chronic pain, major depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. This is a brain-computer interface that is already a commercial device, so it's pretty cool that some brain-computer interface has these commercial devices already in the market. Okay, so BCI can also be used to restore or enhance cognition through neurofeedback therapy. Neurofeedback teaches self-regulation of brain functions by using real-time displays of brain activity, most commonly through EEG. This is a type of biofeedback, and it's often combined with other physiological signals such as electromyography or heart rate. The efficacy of the neurofeedback remains controversial because the therapy has to be personalized, and not all people respond to it in the same way. But recently, the FDA approved a BCI for autism treatment, which is home use, which got good outcomes in its first clinical trial, so FDA cleared it to be commercialized. Neurofeedback is also used to enhance cognitive states and for meditation and relaxation purposes. Based on the fact that the brain waves can be entrained, they can synchronize with an external stimulus when it's present in a defined period of time. So this application is the most known in the market, and there are a lot of commercial headbands for home use neurofeedback, especially for meditation and focusing. For instance, I really like Halosport because it stimulates the motor cortex while the user is performing a motor task that requires skill, like sport, playing an instrument, so on. So it claims to enhance the skill that is being practiced by facilitating the brain plasticity, in particular the long-term potentiation, which is one of the main processes of brain plasticity. So you put it on, you practice sport or practice your instrument, play your music, and Halosport automatically enhance your ability to do it. It's quite controversial, but it's being sold. And you can actually buy one of these for, I think it costs $200, I don't know, but it's quite cheap and you can use it on your own risk. So, sorry, and also we have, I forgot to mention, also we have some applications for meditation, for instance, Muse, that is a really known headband in the market, and also for sleep tracking. This Dream is a headband that tracks your sleeps and then tells you what are you doing wrong about your sleep habits and what you have to do in order to sleep better. There are also some headbands as this of Mentotech for autism that I mentioned before. This is the only headband that is cleared by FDA to treat a condition. The other ones are just used for recreation or for fun. So this is just the one who is a medical device. Okay, so the BCI can be used also as an alternative and augmentative communication systems in which they translate the user's intention of communication into real communication. This application is used by patients who went to maybe a stroke or had a severe motor impairment, such as lock-in syndrome, cerebral palsy, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and so on. So my work in BCI development is related to this application. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about it. We have a startup that is called OTA Project, and OTA Project is dedicated to develop alternative and augmentative communication systems. We have a software application that allows the user to form phrases from pictograms, and it learns from the user's habits to become more efficient and provide real-time communication. So we said that our mission is to return the voice to all those who lost it. So they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So a video should worth 1,000 pictures, I think. So I show you a video and let two users to tell you how our application works and why we work on this. Let's meet Matthias. Okay, so as you can see, we have a lot of users with severe motor impairments, and most of them cannot use the application without assistance because they cannot touch the device screen. So this is a severe limitation that we want to eliminate by connecting a BCI with OTA and letting the user to choose the pictograms without the need of movement. So this is our work in progress, and evoke potential-based BCI for improve the accessibility of our platform. We work with OpenBCI technology, and we are still developing it, but we are going to attend to Dubai's Technology Expo 2020. So with our prototype, so we are very happy and very focused on this work. Okay, so moving on with more applications of BCIs. BCIs can also be used for gaming purpose. I actually found this website that claims that BCI are the video game controllers of the future. Imagine if you could play your favorite game with your thoughts. It would be really cool. So I think they are BCIs are the video game controllers of the future. BCI are also used for what is called hacking. This is provides to the brain a new or an enhanced function, like adding new senses, see more colors than those we can normally see, even download our memory into a hard disk so we can live longer than our bodies, and so on. All of this sounds like science fiction, and mostly it is, but there are serious efforts on develop this kind of BCI. So I think let's see what happens in a few years from now with this kind of development. Of course, there is also the BackHugging, that is the use of BCI to manipulate the people's mood, intentions, memory, and so on. And there are also military applications to improve the soldiers' performance, in particular, the development of exoskeletons commanded by BCIs. So all these emerging technologies raise many ethical concerns that are being addressed by the neuroscience community. That's why the neuroethics is becoming more popular. The problems touch different topics such as managing patient expectations, the concept of personal identity, privacy, and so on. For instance, patients and their relatives might have expectations surrounding BCI technologies, and these expectations might not be met. Different reasons might affect the ability or not of BCI to work, such as the cognitive capacity of the level of disability of the subject, and the risk of the technology not working could cause significant distress to the patient. We see this a lot when our users use OTA projects, because their parents had a lot of expectation about the communication system, and we have to evaluate very carefully every user in order to know if the user will be capable of using it. So that is a very complicated aspect, not to create so many expectations. Then, regarding to privacy, the theory of being able to read minds have a very profound impact on the concept of personal identity and privacy. Even if the technology is still far from being able to read the thoughts of a person, it is important to start considering the ethical implications. So, for instance, if such a machine will be developed that they can read my thoughts, how the data will be transmitted and stored, how the person could keep the ownership of his thought, and so on. So there are a lot of topics to be discussed in this new area of ethics that is called neuroethics. And I think it will evolve with the technology, but it is currently there is society of neuroethics going on, so I think that we will hear a lot of neuroethics in the upcoming future. Okay, so are we good? So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now let's talk about the main limitation of the BCI. Even though they sound wonderful, they are not used in a massive way yet. Let's see why. The first problem is the signal acquisition hardware. As we have seen, the signal travels distance before being acquired by the EEG machine, and the noise and artifacts are causing important problems. BCI systems must have good performance in all environments, so it's necessary to have robust electrodes and a system that it's not affected by the noise in the environment. So the technology must be able to be reliable despite of the noise generated by other devices, by the environment, by the movement of the user, so on. Also, as we saw, the best signal we have is the one acquired through invasive technology. But this invasive BCI suffers as well of many limitations. So first of all, they are implanted only in a small amount of patients, which require surgery for other reasons. There are so many ethical issues involved with invasive technology. Also, the system needs to be safe and remain intact, functional and reliable for decades, because we are not going to extract it from the patient when we lost the signal. So we cannot put the patient through neurosurgery every time we lost the signal or we have a noise into our hardware. So they are pretty complicated. Another problem is the current understanding of the brain signal and its variability. The problem is that it is difficult to decode the signal, or it requires a lot of training, and it is also different for each person. It's on the standard, so the variability of signal features causes a need for adaptive BCI algorithms for proper functions. As I mentioned, we use machine learning algorithms to classify the features that are not linearly separable. Imagine that you use a BCI for controlling a mouse that only clicks in the right thing 8 out of 10 times. That is how machine learning algorithms works. They are trained to recognize patterns, but they can be 100% sure if it is a correct pattern. They have an error rate, and this error rate is a very strong limitation of the technology nowadays. And despite the known basic rules for BCI selection and adjustment, it is still unclear why some BCI paradigms or features are effective with some patients and some not. So, as you can see, we have a lot of problems in the software side to generalize the use for every user. We have to adapt it for every user, train it for every user, and even this, they have an error rate associated, so they are not as reliable as the BCI application requires. Okay, especially when they are used online. So imagine you need that the BCI works very, very fast and very accurate in order to achieve the goals of the application. So these are the two main limitations of the technology. So finally, let's go through some perspectives of the field. There is a really nice roadmap published in 2015 in the BCI 2020 project that summarizes very well the future of the field. So if you are interested, you may take a look at that. So they did an insight from the state of art to vision, and here's a nice summary about the technology which is already available, and the one which is in progress, and the future developments in the different aspects of BCI. So we have replace of functions, restore, enhance, improve, and research. And we have available the spellers. We already have a yes or no command, or a speller by evoked potentials. For instance, there is work done in work decoders that decodes some words that the patient is thinking on, but they are very inaccurate so far. And the next step for this type of application would be a speech decoder. So I need a BCI who knows, which knows in what phrase I am thinking, and says the phrase for me, because I cannot say it. But now we are just in the yes or no detection. We are moving forward the word decoder, and then we will have the speech decoder. And the same happens in the another aspects of the brain-computer interface. So, but in order to achieve that, significant technological advances has to be done first. I found this chart very useful because it summarizes the key aspects about what needs to be improved. So we need to improve the reliability, the usability, the cost, and the use. These are the four main problems of our BCIs currently. And for this, the systems need to become easy to use. So we need to develop wearable systems, more comfortable. So we have to work in sensor materials, self-adjusting mechanics, and they have to be affordable with, I don't know, maybe with the standards or multi-purpose design, as the commercial headbands I showed you before has done. They are affordable, the affordable technology that is used for many applications. So that opens up the market and reduces the cost a lot. But for this requires a lot of research in many fields, like the nature of the brain signals used for BCI and the short-term and long-term effects of closed-loop interfacing. Because as I told you before, we don't know exactly why some BCI system works with some patients and why others don't. So the detection of brain patterns has to be improved. And we have to have a better understanding about the patterns and how they interact with the sensors and the systems and with the algorithm that classifies the signal to improve the efficacy and the long-term use. So I also think that the engagement of all the stakeholders that has the ambition to provide BCI system for the society has to talk to each other, because if BCIs are uptaken by industry and acceptance by end user and therapists, we will require I don't know how to say it, but we will require like a cross-platform medical application. We can use the same BCI for relaxation or recreation purpose. We can also use this BCI to minor medical target that will be benefit from this application. So maybe the industry can focus on some widespread technologies, and then to focus on the medical aspect. So this will require at the end the engagement of policymakers and insurance providers, because we will need to define a new kind of assistive tool. So I think that there are several aspects to keep in mind in order to develop the technology in the future, in the near future, because this is already happened. So I think it's a very promising field into the neurotechnology, and that will impact the quality of life of many people, many familiars, I don't know, relatives, and very relatives that are dealing with a lot of rehabilitation and disease problem with his loved one. So that will be all. Thank you for hearing, and I'm sorry if I didn't go deep into any particular topic. As you can see, BCI development takes several areas of study. So if anyone wants to discuss a particular topic further, feel free to contact me. I want to give an overview about all the applications we have. So thank you.
Okay, very good, Florencia. Excellent. Such a huge area, and you covered a lot of territory, and there's so much to talk about. I invite you to go into different areas of BCI in the future. Okay, well, Joaquin, I was glad you came, Joaquin. So let me ask you first, any comments or questions you have of Florencia?
No, I believe it's a very interesting topic, which is developing so far and will go on in the future, I believe. I am more familiar with the interventions, such as the topic from like epilepsy, for instance, with some dysplasia or some lesions particular to the mesial temporal lobe, not with these kind of topics, which are at different aspects. I'm also familiar with the functional MRI. That is also a topic which is going advancing, and it's a very useful tool for us.
So, Joaquin, have you been involved in BCI applications during neurosurgery for epilepsy evaluation or so on? Because I know that there are some research groups that use this neurosurgery in order to perform some studies about cognition, and they are very interesting.
Yes, the more like interesting for us is the functional MRI, for example. We have recently made a surgery on a patient with certain dysplasia, which is like a pathology that is located over the cortex, the cerebral cortex. And with the functional MRI, we can localize the functions, like for example, the hand movement, and how to preserve this function in that particular patient. This was very useful, and we have to apply it like passive functional MRI.
Okay.
That is because this was a particular patient, this was a pediatric patient. So it's when, instead of asking the patient to move, you have to make a little sedation of the patient, and then you actively, from outside, you move the arm, for example, for the patient. And that's later you register that preferably on a 3 Tesla equipment. So then you can be able to planify the surgery. And then when intraoperative, the different tools that you're able to use, for example, as you mentioned, the electrocorticography, it's a tool that is very well used, and also the profound electrodes, we also use that. It's provide us better information, as for example, the electrodes that are put only in the surface, because these like different types of sensors all over that axis, so you can make a real topography of where the lesion is and where to planify that excision, for example.
Yeah, in fact, this type of technology is the best because you have the best signal and the best spatial resolution. But for instance, for my purpose, it's impossible to apply because I have to open up the skull, so it ends up there. So the most promised area is the implantable BCI, when I am able to put an electrode in the cortex, and it stays there, and it transmits the signal wireless to a device. So this area it's been very studied, very developed. For instance, we have Elon Musk that is working on Neuralink. Its purpose is to develop the first implantable BCI for rehabilitation purposes because it's not medical.
Tú vas a las 8:30 porque es que si no voy, yo ya no voy.
I hear someone.
I'm sorry. Let me. There's some noise here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Florence.
No problem. Also, Facebook did some announcement. I think the last year that they were about to research how to make a speller with a BCI that allows you to talk or to write without moving the mouth. So there are huge companies that are making huge investment in developing this type of BCI. So I hope we have some advances in the near future.
Very good. You know, I heard from a University of Miami researcher. I'll give you his contact info, but he's working on BCI also. Just a comment, Florencia, and the part I was really interested in was the applications, and I know different progress has been made with different areas, and that's a huge topic. I know it'll probably take a presentation in itself. How far you've gone in each area of application, but briefly, how far have they gone with bladder and stroke? How far have they gone in that type of research?
Okay, currently,
generally, just briefly.
Yeah. In the stroke area, BCI are mostly used for rehabilitation. So they enhance the therapy after you have a stroke, and they enhance the therapy by controlling or closing the loop between the brain and the limb that is affected. So imagine that you have a stroke and you have compromised a limb, and you have to go to rehabilitation, and they put or they use BCI in combination with the traditional therapy in order for you to see the feedback that you are intending to use. For instance, if I want to move my hand, but I can't because...
No sé si ya terminaron, pero aquí...
Sorry, I hear someone. Hello. I hear someone. Okay, so imagine that you are rehabilitating your hand, and the therapy tells you that you have to move your hand. So you think of moving your hand because you know how to do it, but you can't because your part of the cortex that commands the hand has been compromised. So if I connect a BCI to the limb and then to the brain and tell, well, when this patient is thinking in this and this signal occurs, please move the hand so the patient can see the feedback, can see the hand movement, and this reinforces the loop of the command, the action command, and the movement. I don't know if it's clear because I don't know how to explain it, but essentially the BCI is used to reinforce the therapy. You can see the action that you want to do, but you can't because you are with the stroke, and this accelerates the brain plasticity of the brain. So this is regarding stroke, and regarding bladder function, there is a neurostimulator that is used to stimulate the muscles in the bladder via the spinal cord, and they said, okay, this is, for instance, for hyperactive bladder, when you have a muscle that is too activated, it inhibits the activation by switching or by controlling the neural path that is going to the muscles of the bladder. Mm-hmm. There is also a BCI, it's called bladder neurostimulation, and it's also, I think that there are some commercial devices for that. They also use the stimulation of the I don't remember the name, but the nerve that is in the foot. I don't remember the name in English, sorry, but they also use a nerve in the foot that is a distal nerve. I don't know if you can help me here, Joaquin.
The perineal nerve?
No, the nerve that is in the ankle or in the foot. Okay, a nerve that is located in the foot. They use it to stimulate and to provoke an inhibition in the neural path that goes to the bladder. We can look into that. Okay. Let me search for it.
Okay.
I can't remember.
You're going to Google it, huh?
Yeah. I cannot remember the name.
Yeah. The only nerve I know of in the leg is the perineal nerve. I don't know if you recall, Joaquin, from the days of neuroanatomy of the foot.
I don't know which you're talking about.
The one that causes foot drop, right? Causes foot drop. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, I got it. The tibial nerve. It's also.
Oh, tibial nerve. Okay.
In Spanish, it's the same. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
But the tibial nerve stimulation. There are a lot of studies that show that if you stimulate the tibial nerve, you can inhibit also the neural path to the bladder.
Wow, I've never heard of that.
Yes, it's called percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation.
Wow, never heard of that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And there are some devices like the deep brain stimulation device for Parkinson's disease that are being developed for this kind of application.
Very good. Well, I know there's a tremendous amount of territory we could cover, but we'll limit it to what you've done. Thank you very much, Florencia. This is all going to be recorded, and I'll send you both copies of the recording. And we look forward to mañana en la noche hablando español, lo mismo tópico. And thank you very much, Joaquin, for coming. I'm gonna stop the presentation right now, but you stay there. I will chat. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.